Hello, welcome and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our session with the provocative title, Business as Unusual. My name is Nikolaus Lang. I'm a senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group and leading the BCG Henderson Institute with a strong focus on geopolitics. I'm being joined by a very distinguished panel, starting with Florence Verzelen, on my left, Executive Vice President of EMEA, Dassault Systèmes. Oh, the coffee is also coming. Perfect. Thank you. Then Erki Maillard, who is leading the government affairs of EDF, Senior Vice President. Then we have Jean Madar, Chairman, Co-founder and CEO of Interparfums, which is a global luxury and fragrance company. And last but not least, Bahadir Kaleaghazi, who is the President of the Paris Bosporus Institute, and who was also Director General of TÜSİAD, which is the Turkish MEDEF. So we have here a very distinguished and diverse panel covering very different industries, from tech and defense to energy to luxury and fragrance, and also a global perspective on one of the most vibrant economies we have here in Europe. I'd like to start, the title Business as Unusual is actually very interesting because I'd like to share a personal experience I had in May 2022. In May 2022, there was the annual meeting in Davos, and I had a conversation with the CEO of a $50 billion company, and we were sitting over coffee, and he had a very interesting sentence. It was interesting because the annual meeting took place in May and not in January because of COVID, and so it was pushed to May. But it has also the effect that the annual meeting happened after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And so this CEO told me and said, you know, Nicholas, it's quite interesting. For me as a CEO, in the 2010s, early 2010s, the whole topic of digital appeared on my agenda. Then around 2015, the whole topic of climate appeared on my agenda. And geopolitics appeared on my agenda on February 24th of this year. And of the three topics, it's the topic we are least well prepared as a company. And so that will be the discussion round we have over the next 45 minutes, is to discuss about how are we as companies prepared for this. Now, the first round we will do a tour de table, as we say in French, which is what are geopolitical shifts that have impacted you over the last 12 months, 5 years, 10 years. And so I'll start with mine, and we'll go through the round of thinking through that. So I will start with the last 12 months. And I would say there are exactly 3 dates that I found particularly interesting this year. January 21st, April 2nd, and September 2nd. So January 21st was the day, not also after Donald Trump's inauguration, but it was the day where actually on one side of the Atlantic, the US announced Stargate, $500 billion into AI. And the same day, the Chinese announced DeepSeek R1, which is a completely different, of course, technical approach. And just for me, really kind of exemplifies the breakup of tech stacks in the world. Well, on April 2nd, I don't need to spend too much of time, so-called Liberation Day. But it's also interesting that, this date always refers a little bit, and I don't know if President Trump wants to be kind of co-quoted with Lenin, but Lenin is supposed to say there are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. And I think what we have seen on April 2nd is that it took the current US administration 8 weeks to go back 116 years in tariff history, because the Liberation Day tariffs brought us to the level of 1909. So 8 weeks from inauguration to April 2 to go back to the tariff level 116 years ago. And the third date, which I found interesting, is September 2nd, which was the meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Tianjin, where I think for all those who still doubted that we are in a multipolar world, I think people understood that the monopolar world or bipolar world is over. So that were my three. But so maybe, Florence, what would be from your perspective, from Dassault's perspective, the 2-3 shifts that you felt particularly important?
Thank you very much for asking the question, Nicolas, and hello to everybody. I'm very happy to be talking to a lot of you today. Well, for me, I have one shift in common with you, definitely, and it's linked to April the 2nd, fragmentation of trade. At Dassault Systèmes, we are doing software to help our customers from the industry innovate more sustainably, manufacture in a more quickly manner, and operate their assets better. And what became very complex after April 2nd is that it was a nightmare for my 370,000 industrial customers. If I take the example of a very large customer that we have in the United States, it's one of the biggest car company, and they are doing their cars based on the virtual twins they are doing on our software. And the CEO asked me, can you simulate the impact that the April 2nd tariffs will have on the cost of a car of $20,000 on which I'm doing 5% margin? And we could do the simulation super quickly. And the increase of cost was $7,000. So much above the margin, but also not sustainable for the American customer. And this is for one of the biggest car company, but I had the same simulation done for company like Nestlé or some other company like Renault in France. Long story short, a lot of the industry players were made out of market overnight, and they had to restructure their supply chain, taking into account that it could change every night. And we are working on that thanks to AI and simulation of different supply chain, including simulation of the product, how you change your product to adapt to a fragmented world. But this is a huge disruption for a lot of companies that are doing products that are very important for the citizen of many countries. So that was the first thing, fragmentation of the world. And the second, I don't really have a date in mind, but this is a matter around data and sovereignty. When OpenAI arrived, we understood that for the industry, the world will never be the same. The world will never be the same because there is a range of acceleration that comes with Gen AI. That is a figure of 10 to 20 to 100 times acceleration on innovation, research and development for new molecules, for life science, and even restructuring of supply chain and manufacturing plant. But it's only possible if you have data and you can keep your data safe. And in a multipolarized world where there are regulations like Cloud Act, you have to make sure that you keep your data, which is now your IP, in a sovereign environment. And this topic of sovereignty and data and the importance of data was totally not there in 2019. I mean, we were living in an open world. And now, this topic on protecting your data, transforming your data into innovation, into resilience, making it a competitive advantage is a huge topic and even a survival topic for a lot of companies, because if they lose their data, they lose their IP and they're out of market.
And I think the topic of AI sovereignty, as you just described it, is of utmost importance for governments and corporates alike.
Exactly, yeah. For government and corporates alike, because this is exactly also a choice of government. Which industry do you want to keep?
Yes.
And the debate on defense industry in Europe in order to stay sovereign.
Absolutely. So Erki, you are an industry which I was always told is at the forefront of geopolitics. When 10 years ago we were asking who is looking at geopolitics, I always got the answer, only the extractive industries, mining, oil, gas, energy, because all the others see the world as flat, and maybe you didn't see it as flat. But nevertheless, what would be, from your point of view, the 2 or 3 shifts that were particularly prevalent from an EDF point of view?
Thanks, Nikolaus. As you said, I think the energy sector has always been subject or prone to geopolitical shocks. Even some major geopolitical crises are energy crises, real big, for instance. So it doesn't mean that energy companies are better prepared. That's the real truth. Let me pick maybe two tendencies or two shifts. One, and you won't be surprised, it's the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Why is that? Because energy was part of the crisis. It's the first time we witness at such a scale the weaponization of energy. As you may remember, Russia at that time leveraged its energy dominance over GNL, especially, to exercise pressures over European member states, create divisions, raise the energy cost, create disruption, but also uncertainty on the whole market. And that led to major shifts in the energy sector itself. Indeed, when we look at the energy policy, so to say, we basically try to strike the right balance between three corners of one triangle. We need secure energy, I'll come back to that. We need affordable energy, the economic aspects of the energy crisis. And third, we need clean energy. And you can't have all of them at any cost, or I mean, it's a question of money and time, as always, as engineers always say, at least at EDF. And people, especially in the European Union, and especially in some member states, realized that the security value of some energy sources was of paramount importance, and that the price paid by the consumer had to take into account this intrinsic value of security. And so it's a major shift. We will come back to what companies can do to cope with these issues and what we can do in later on. But I think it's important to have that in mind. The second shift is, I think it's more of a long-term shift that we've witnessed over the past almost 20 years. It's not Trump. It started even before Obama. It's the US pivoting towards US and mounting tensions between China and US. EDF, as a utility company, unlike maybe Dassault or you in the fragrance industry, we are not manufacturing and exporting, except in the nuclear business, but it's a very specific one. We are investing abroad, but we are nevertheless developing projects using technologies from all over the world. And for instance, in the renewable business, wind industry, for instance, we are heavily dependent on rare earths, for instance, or permanent magnets. And there, what not only companies, but also states realize that these dependencies can create, as you've rightly described, Florence, major disruptions and price increases, so that at the end, the whole hierarchy between energy sources can be changed. And that occurred especially on offshore wind, where we witnessed an increase of roughly 40%. It's not only due to the tensions between the US and China, but also to the logistical disruptions after COVID. But still, this is also a major shift for us, and leads to big strategic new orientations for energy policies all across the world, I would say, but especially in Europe.
No, and I think it's very interesting. Beyond the energy trilemma you laid out, Erki, I think there is also, as you said, this multi-layered level of dependencies. Yeah, and I think what we realize in Europe is that Europe is particularly exposed to dependencies. Yeah, I don't know. Ursula von der Leyen is said to have said the bon mot: Europe outsourced defense to US, energy to Russia, and growth to China, and all outsourcing partners are insecure anymore. So that's a very interesting perspective on dependencies.
This sentence is very true, especially for one country in Europe.
Yeah, I know. Totally, it's Germany. Yeah. So let's go from energy-heavy investment to the beautiful part of life with fragrances and luxury. And so, Jean, you are producing and distributing perfumes and fragrances for world-leading brands in 120 countries of the world. How do you handle that? And what were your big geopolitical shifts in the last few years?
Thank you, Nicolas. So my name is Jean Madar. I'm a chairman and CEO of Interparfum, established company working on producing, distributing parfum in 120 countries. Honestly, when I received the invitation, I asked myself what the hell I'm going to tell them about. I respect a lot Dassault Systèmes, and I can imagine the nightmares that you had with this fragmentation of work and the tariff, etc. But me, I'm here to give you a little bit more of hope, because for us, the tariff, of course, we had to deal with it when it happened, was not such a bad news, to be honest with you. Why? Because I didn't even know what it was. When you work on a very, very high margin like fragrance and cosmetics, when you work on 80% gross margin, honestly, if you have to pay 2 or 3 or 4% for logistics, and this was done by people that I didn't even know. So for me, it was a wake-up call. They told me, okay, from one day it's going to go from 0 to 15, and if you import from China, it's going to go to 55. So we started to work quickly, but calmly, and we made a decision to produce in the US only what will be sold in the US. So we had factories producing a lot of American fragrances like Abercrombie, Coach, Hollister. We have in our portfolio, we have a lot of American brands, Guess, Oscar de la Renta. So we said, okay, these products will be produced and sold just in the US. And when it comes to selling these products outside of the US, we're going to produce them outside of the US. It was super simple. The decision was fast, executed. So we called some factories in Europe and say, would you like to do some filling for us? And they couldn't believe. They say, really? This is what's going to happen? This is what the impact of Trump is going to be, to give back some business to Europe? Yes, this is what is happening. So that's the first part, first challenge. Of course, it's a longer process and a little bit more complicated than I want to describe, but it was not a threat. It was nobody committed suicide. Nobody lost their potential of a bonus at the end of the year. It was very good. Second challenge for us, enormous challenge. 20% of our business is in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, GCC, Israel are big consumers of fragrance. So the tension, October 7th, all our teams looked at the business and said something is going to happen here. And we really reduced our budget, we reduced our investment, we reduced our advertising campaign. And it was a total mistake. Total mistake. Let me tell you that in Israel, for instance, fragrance sales were up in 23 and 24. One could think that a country that has seen such a massacre, plus that have all these young kids at the army, do they have time to go and buy in a store fragrance? Yes, and this is what I call the lipstick effect. Lipstick effect is when things are bad, women buy lipstick. When there is tension in the world, and I can talk about consumption of lipstick in Russia, and I can talk about consumption of cosmetics in Ukraine, because we have this information, and they are up. They are up. So when business is bad, we use lipstick, and when business is good, we even use more. So, I don't want to say that we live in a dream world, but we have some we have some very interesting situations like that.
Very good. Yeah, it's good to have a contrarian view and to see the lipstick effect is something I will share with my wife tonight. So we'll see how her consumption goes up or down. So last but not least, Bahadir, your perspective. You're representing, of course, also Turkey or bridging between Turkey and Europe. Turkey is playing an outstanding role in this whole geopolitical setup. How do you see, what are your major geopolitical shifts over the last 12 months to 5 years?
Thank you very much, and thank you to all. It was very interesting to listen to you all. I think the major challenge, you have in BSG a good list of challenges in your publication. The challenge is every one of them, of course, for the businesses, but also the fact that they are all more than ever interlinked. If I may say, the space-time continuum has become too much, too fast, maybe too fast for the organic life forms that we are. The things are happening, and if the growth of the AI and the big technological changes from the quantum technologies to neurosciences, if they are all right, even the most pessimistic predictions point out to a near future of not more than 10 years for an almost totally different world in which we will be evolving, navigating as companies, as individuals, as civic society people, academics, as people. So if it is true, it's happening now. But we are trying to discuss, this is why we are here, the geopolitics, or in a broader sense, geostrategic intelligence is more than ever about security, first of all. Security in the narrow sense for the military security, NATO, for all of us, certainly still the transatlantic alliance matters. And there are risks happening already in Russia, which is the most important threat, according to NATO. China is the most important systemic challenge for the West. Everything in the eastern flank of our security world, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, is important. There is a southern belt of tensions from East Asia to North Africa. We have the Arctic corridor, which is also becoming a new center of the world between the continents, with the melting roads of Northern Pole. And then we have also these kind of hybrid warfare marked by cybersecurity, by disinformation, by interference in the democratic process of other countries. So it's a complicated issue. And also we have the security of energy supply with the AI revolution, AI data centers, which will consume as monsters more energy, together with air conditioning and probably hybrid electric vehicles. We are finally entering the real age of electricity, probably. And then there is the security link with terrorism, with all other issues. But this is just one pillar. Other pillars are finance, technology, domestic politics, the democratic resilience of our societies. So when we are talking about any of these pillars, we cannot ignore the other one. So how to be intelligent enough to guide our companies, our institutions, our organizations, our lives, I think this is the real question that matters.
Thank you very much. So I think we did the first perspective on a broad set of geopolitical shifts, talking about AI sovereignty, the impact of tariffs, the impact of energy disruption and the dependencies, the positive or non-positive twist of crises on consumer goods and luxury goods. And I think, as you described, I think a full canvas of challenges. Now, let me come to the question we had, business as unusual. I said in my introduction that many CEOs, and I'm talking to hundreds of CEOs per year, are facing geopolitics a little bit with a surprise and say, okay, what should I do? What can I do? Can I influence anything? And so what we have seen over the last few years is that some companies are very resolutely developing what we call a geopolitical muscle. That can go from I name a chief geopolitics officer to I define a geopolitical function to I have a network of analysts or sensors in the world. So I think we have the beauty of having here very different institutions and industries. So maybe starting with you, how would you see has Dassault Systems evolved this? Or did you already have this geopolitical muscle? Or are you investing in this going forward?
Thank you. It's actually a very good question, Nikolaus, because when we were living back in 2019 and we didn't know that it was such an easy world at that time, but that was a very nice world, we didn't need to have that geopolitical function. But now that we are living in a more complex world, for me, it's a question of life or death to have this geopolitical muscle. And let me explain why. As you know, we are living in a world with taxes, but we are also living in a world where back in 2019, I have 132 labs in 110 countries, and I was basically developing the best possible software with the best people in design, in artificial intelligence, in Gen AI, in simulation, in whatever, in the best country where I had the best people. And that was awesome because then I could provide to whatever customer in Uzbekistan or in Brazil or in South Korea the best possible software. Well, this is not anymore possible for me. Why? Because right now the US Senate is preventing me to sell to some customers from other countries my US IP. If I have IP from other countries, I'm also possibly prevented from selling it in China or in the United States or elsewhere. It means that I cannot anymore put the best team in the place where they are to develop the best software, but I have to look at them in area where they're going to be safe to sell to the people who are going to be most interested in their software. And this is really changing and like creating a conversation about the localization of my R&D teams all over the world and discussion about relocalization. And it's also reorganizing Dassault system around that, and where we used to have a universal offer for everybody, we are coming to different offers from different areas of the world. So it has a huge impact, including the fact that I'm not necessarily always able to sell the best software to some of my customers. So yes, geopolitical muscle, and therefore reorganization of our R&D first, and then we have considerably strengthened our analysis on legal risk. And like now, every morning from time to time, I'm receiving an email from my chief legal officer in the United States about what happened last night and what impact it's going to have, and which customer I have to inform to pay attention to some aspect of what they're doing with my software, but also how it might affect my office. So we have organized ourselves in order to monitor that very closely, including the consequences in all the key countries we are in. So, and this is something we didn't need like 3 or 4 years ago. So it's becoming much more important. And what we are doing now is that in all our high potential training, because our only assets at Dassault Systèmes is people. So training is very important for us to keep the best people, upskill the best people. We have developed some geopolitical courses in order for them to integrate that in the way they do research and development, in the way they manage their business, in order for the system to stay as resilient as possible.
I think 2 points I found particularly interesting what you said is one is this training of people. I think many of our employees today are not sensitized to the regulatory challenges or tariff challenges that you might have. So I think that's very interesting because I haven't heard that a lot. And the second point, which you just said, is the fragmented tech landscape or regulatory landscape will lead to fragmented tech firms, which, as you said, won't be able to offer the best solution to every client because we are far away from Tom Friedman's book of 2005, The World is Flat. We're seeing mountain chains coming up. So very, very interesting how Dassault Systèmes is evolving. Erkki, from EDF's perspective, you described dependencies, you described the impact it had. Where do you stand with regard to geopolitical muscle?
Well, maybe two different things. When you think of geopolitical disruptions, clearly there is the word anticipation or risk assessments that pops up, and it's one of the aspects. I won't tell you if we anticipated, I won't tell you we anticipated everything that happened over the last 3 years, not at all. But it's true that some of the geopolitical tendencies were already there in the landscape. If you take, for instance, the renewable energy, witnessing the political presidential campaign in the US, you could tell that the world would be a bit different for renewables before or after Donald Trump. And all the renewable energy players, such as EDF, energy developers or manufacturers, took some flags when the President Trump issued an executive order to come back to scrap, authorization that were already given, sometimes for offshore wind parks that were already built. So that's a major shift. You know, for our legal people, it was almost impossible to conceive that something like that could happen. And you can look at the market cap, market value of several of these companies that were badly hit. So that's one thing, and clearly we can adapt, we can prepare ourselves, but I would say, and that's my second point, it's not enough, at least in the energy sector. What is, I think, extremely important from a geopolitical point of view is to try not to influence the geopolicy itself. Of course, that's in the hands of diplomats, governments, etc. But try to have at least a conversation with our partners, taking into account these geopolitical factors and trying to have a conducive environment. And I'll give you a concrete example, so that at the end, our business will have the proper rules adapted to the new world we are living in. One word there, technology neutrality, for instance. Technology neutrality is a way for utilities to offer to our clients the best energy solutions possible to meet this energy triangle: secure, clean, affordable. In the European environment, technology neutrality is still not a given. I give you just one concrete example. If you want to finance a feasibility study for small modular reactors in Europe, you can do it. You can't do it with European funds. You can't do it for European technology, but you can do it with US funds for US technologies, because there is still a bias against nuclear in the EU regulations. It is slightly changing, and we invested a lot of time, money, human resources into this conversation. It's called, some of you I'm sure are aware of this taxonomy debate, and in a way we, at the end of the day, we have a half empty, half full glass from a political or legal point of view, but still, at least now people are aware that this argument, this issue of technology neutrality is of paramount importance to have the most cost-effective and resilient energy system. So you see what I mean, is there, it's not about predicting the future during scenarios, which is part of the geopolitical analysis. It's really to shaping the global or regional conversation so that the regulation will be conducive with what you think you can provide to the market as a product manufacturer or service provider.
Yeah, and I think this is something, Erkki, which you see a lot. Even I just was sitting with the chief geopolitics officer of a large German conglomerate, And he said a very interesting sentence. He said, you know, lobbying used to be a dirty word. So we're not lobbying, but we need to shape the context when it comes to tech regulations, when it comes to migration possibilities and so on, if we want to really shape that world. Because on the other side, it's already being shaped. So I think this is very important that the companies are defining themselves as context shapers to a certain extent. Yeah.
In a way, just very, very brief comment to that. In a way, I wanted to quote or use the Brexit example in one of the major geopolitical shifts, and it's exactly what happened as well for us. We are a prominent actor in the UK because we are the sole and unique nuclear operator there, and we have very large investment projects. Actually, the largest investment there, which is Hinkley Point C, building a nuclear power plant. And exactly like you said, Nicolas, the migration topic is absolutely is of paramount importance if we want to succeed. And it's not, you know, mingling. It's not a dirty word to explain to the UK government that if they want to be successful and to have a nuclear power plant, they will need to define new rules for migration in the UK. And it's exactly what you described.
Very good. So thank you very much, Erki. So, Jean, from your perspective, how well we understood that the impact of this year was not dramatic. No one lost his bonus. Actually, the lipstick effect made that the crisis areas were actually more active than before. So, do you live very well without any geopolitics sensitivity and muscle, or do you think there's something needed?
It's gonna sound weird, but. Okay. This geopolitical muscle, I think we were able to get through it by the culture of a company, by the people working in the company. So we didn't hire a chief of geopolitical to give us some opinions. We are present in many countries. We assess on a weekly basis the risk associated with the launch of products or development of new distribution. But I will say that the best assets that we have are the people who know the countries and can give us an opinion, especially in the last, I will say, 2 years, where we had to deal with many changes, but the changes that we look at are very different than you. For us, for instance, we saw in the last 24 months, so I'm going to make you smile with my, I'm going to continue with this lipstick case, but we saw a huge olfactive trend, a new trend. People wanted to smell something that was normally only geared for one region, which was the Middle East. In the Middle East, everybody used the wood. Wood is a very important ingredient. But with TikTok and Amazon Beauty spreading this smell, we quickly had to ask our master perfumer to put wood everywhere. So launching a new fragrance in America, I have to have wood. Launching a new fragrance in China, I have to have wood. This is, I will say, soft power from this region, and they were able to impose and to change the way people were smelling before. This is not geopolitical change, but this is part of the world that we are living into and the world that is changing.
No, absolutely. And I think, well, you know, I think we tend to discount soft power in this whole geopolitical area, but I think it plays an important role going forward. Yes, so Bahadir, your perspective, you have overseen a lot of companies, you are in touch with many companies in a, if I may say so, geopolitically volatile environment and macroeconomically volatile environment. How is your perspective? How are Turkish companies or companies in your region reacting to this? What kind of muscle have they built, maybe? And maybe just a quote, I'm very often in Istanbul and people say, CEOs tell me, say, Nikolaus, why do you worry about 4% inflation, 5% inflation? We are handling factor 10 of this and we are very good in this. So it's a matter of how do you develop this muscle?
Well, rules of the jungle, probably. You have to survive. And the survival instinct sometimes is helpful. We don't have to need that, of course. But if we need it, and we are able to develop it, and not only in Turkey, but in all the different countries. I am board member in a few companies and strategic advisor in few companies. Some of them are in Turkey or in Europe or in United States. I can tell you that there is one reality which is really hitting the daily life of a company. In the past, in the executive boards of the companies, there used to be a point of order, point of agenda on the geopolitics, a more macro brainstorming, a kind of reflection, more intellectual about what was happening in the world, and also about the macroeconomics, inflation as well. Some legislation in China, a new standard stemming from Brussels, a new US policy of incentives somewhere. That was it. Today, every point in the agenda of a company or an international organization has to be filtered through geopolitics. Are we talking about investment strategy, human resources, marketing, brand value of the company? We have to take into account geopolitics in the broader sense. Blockchain is also a cryptocurrency market is about geopolitics. Or in the past, when we were, hearing about a Chinese decision or a policy, if we don't do any business with China at that moment, it was okay. But today, whatever China does has a direct impact on the global supply chains, critical raw materials, investment decisions, access to finance, or India, or United States, or Turkey, or the neighborhood, or France, or Germany. Whatever we do or we don't do has a direct impact on the companies. Therefore, companies are increasingly becoming independent from their national context, but they continue to be in the same international context as well. We are still unable to understand the quantum mechanics scientifically, and this lack of understanding to today's reality is not much far from the weirdness of this quantum physics. Yes, you are right. The conditions of survival are very harsh in different countries for different companies. How to make sure that a government in waiting in Paris or in London or in Washington or in Ankara or in Damascus or in Tel Aviv or New Delhi will have an impact on our business or not is still a relevant question. But I think the key to understand what is happening is to make sure that in an age of AI, where the analytical talents of humans are imported towards new platforms, it's about making a choice. We have to make a choice. Are we going to still rely on our human compass, human intelligence, human moral and ethics, or not? So it's a choice. It's a moment of choice more than anything else. And that choice has to be made in platforms also like this one, with human interface. We are still here in the human surroundings.
Yeah, that's right. And we're still here, Bahadir. And so I thought it was very interesting because this last round showed us the diversity of geopolitics moving from kind of really simulating bill of materials of cars on your systems, pushing for new ways of nuclear energy in Europe. I think really looking at the soft power of oud, which I think is also something which, next to the lipstick effect, will probably remain in many minds here. And also having, I think, an important point, which is this ethical dimension. I think in a more and more fragmenting and unstable world, I think having a strong ethical compass is very important for each of us, but also for firm leaders. And let me just conclude with, I think, 5 lessons we have learned in our research for companies that are thriving in this geopolitical environment. I think there are 5 no-regret moves. Number 1 is build a geopolitical muscle, which I think all of you have described, like the ability of a company to understand geopolitical changes, but also to interpret and influence them. Number 2, I think work on supply chain resilience. You talked about the fragmentation of the organization, or the adaptation. I think that's pretty clear. Number 3, and Bahadir, you talked about macroeconomics. I think we need to continue to be aware that we will have volatility in tariffs, in price, inflation. That's pretty clear. Number 4, I think we need to adapt to a fragmented world with fragmented organizations to a certain extent. And number 5 is really to understand the tech and AI race, and especially the access to technology according to the new regulations. So with that, we hope that you had an interesting conversation, business as unusual. I'd like to thank my panelists, co-panelists for joining me, and I wish you a remaining good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thanks.